Our religious tradition is founded on love. Actually, life itself is grounded in love, a love that is open and generous. We may not always feel this love, but if we are honest and we allow ourselves to reflect on life, we will realize this truth. We have been called into being, and we are sustained in existence for no other reason than loving generosity. We are the recipients of unbounded generosity. For some reason, we are loved. It was out of love that we came from nothing. We certainly did nothing to deserve this love. All we can conclude is that we are loved because the source from which we came is loving. God is love, as St. John puts it in his letters. The universe springs from God's love. We have been called by this love, and we will only be happy if we live in this love. Therefore, when we are directed to love and love one another as Jesus does in today's gospel, we are not being asked to do something contrary to our nature. Rather, we are being told to live in accord with the nature out of which we have been fashioned. We come from God, who is love. So it is in our very nature to love and to be loved. The credibility of Jesus is again under attack in the gospel. He had just succeeded in silencing the Sadducees, the priestly and aristocratic group that was in sympathy with Roman occupation. Now the Pharisees, a lay group that exerted significant influence among the people because of their knowledge and piety, set out to trick Jesus. Jesus, one of them, a lawyer, an expert in the law, asked Jesus to identify the most important commandment. This question was an issue of considerable interest to rabbis at the time, about which there seems to have been little agreement. While the discussion in rabbinic circles was probably carried on for the sake of clarification, in the present hostile context, the question is posed in order to put Jesus to the test. By this point in history, the law included 613 commandments, 365 prohibitions, one for each day of the year, and 248 prescriptions. Although all laws were considered binding because they had been delivered by God to Moses, some were regarded as heavy or very important, and others were looked upon as less weighty or light. Despite the fact that this was a disputed question in Judaism at the time, whatever priority Jesus would proclaim would most likely be challenged by someone. If it appeared he was annulling a part of the law, he could lose his status in the community as a teacher. Jesus' answer is faithful to his own Jewish faith. He does not single out any particular statute, but rather endorses the summons that constitutes the Shema, the most significant prayer of the Israelite tradition. To the injunction to love God with all one's heart and soul, Jesus adds, with all your mind, probably for the purpose of emphasizing the total engagement of the person. This is his way of saying the love of God must occupy one's entire being and not be simply superficial. Jesus was asked to identify one commandment, and he offers two. The second, which he says is like the first, rather than second in importance, is a citation from the book of Leviticus. Thus, twice Jesus has reached into the biblical law in order to answer the question posed to him. By bringing the admonitions together as he does, he shows that, though not identical, they are related. Placing his answer within the context of the Shema, he makes the proclamation that there is no other God but this God, the controlling theme in his response. From this proclamation flows the responsibility to love God with one's entire being and to love one's neighbor as oneself. Jesus is not judging between the heavy and the light commandments. Instead, he is asserting that the entire religious tradition is dependent on this commandment of love. In other words, there is no genuine fulfillment of the law that does not flow from love of God and love of others. We may sometimes think it is easier to love God than to love others. Maybe it is, maybe not. Other people are tangible. We can see and hear them, interact with them. It's not like that with God. We show we love God by loving what God does. Yes, yet how we love God is the way we love our neighbor. Our religious tradition goes so far as to say that we really do not love God if we do not love others, as St. John says in his first letter. It is true that we love God when we love those who are intimate parts of our lives. But love like God's love may be more expansive than that. If our love is open and generous, like God's love, we will care for the widows and orphans and the aliens, as the first reading from Exodus reminds us. Our world today and our nation is undergoing a migration crisis. If our love is open and generous like God's love, we will do what we can to provide for the poor and for migrants, for those on the margins, for those trapped in the prison of poverty. If our love is open and generous like God's love, we will treasure God's world and God's people within it. Love, which is the foundation of the reign of God, is contagious. When we love others, the reign of God spreads throughout the world. It was the goodness of their lives that made the Thessalonians renowned in the neighboring territories, as St. Paul points out in our second reading. In a homily on our gospel, St. Augustine said, "People are renewed by love. Love rejuvenates them. The compassion that we show toward others, the poor, the migrant, is a form of evangelization. It proclaims much louder than any words could ever do that the reign of God is established. When we love like this, we truly love with the openness and generosity of God. Let us rejuvenate our lives and our world with love. Love, after all, as the old song says, makes the world go round."